Hello and welcome to Antiques Masterclass. Today we've got Robert McMillan, who's kindly come in today to talk about Empire clocks. Robert, thank you so much for coming in.
Good morning, Alice. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. How long have you been a clock collector for?
I've been interested in clocks 4 or 5 years old.
So not too long then?
Not too long. I've been in business for 43 years, officially, as it were. Yeah. But my family were always clockmakers before that.
Okay.
I've traced them back to 1837 so far, and I've actually managed to buy one of my ancestors' clocks.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I have it in the hallway, which I'm most proud of.
Oh, it's so... My father dealt in Himalayan bronzes and tonkas and so forth, and literally about 3 years ago, a gentleman came in to my auction house and said, this is part of the Joe Gelpie collection, and I had to buy it. I bought a Tibetan mask off him, and it was just, it
Yes,
warms your heart, doesn't it?
It does, it does. Every time I wind this one, I think of it.
Yeah,
I didn't actually know him long past. But,
So today you're going to talk about Empire clocks.
Yes.
What sort of attracted you to Empire clocks?
I was first attracted to Empire clocks when I lived in France, because I lived in Antibes for a little while after I finished my apprenticeship, and there's many extreme examples down there, and I loved it.
And Empire clocks have been going from, I mean, they're French.
Yes, the term we use today, Empire clocks and Empire furniture, artefacts, even silver, all terms from when Napoleon was in power, when he was in his consulate, and they wanted to establish a new style of furniture and of artefacts and clocks to get away from the Bourbon kings that immediately preceded them. Some of it was work creation. Because How
do you mean work creation?
Yeah, well, I was really surprised about this when I learnt about it. If you can imagine within Paris, population of say 100,000, sort of in 1800, a lot of them were employed upon the manufacture of fine furniture, fine gilding. I mean, the clock we've got before us today, that probably had 100 different craftsmen put input to that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was huge, the population, and they were all interdependent upon one another. So, I mean, Napoleon's first wife, she actually even started up her own factory, which is the Sèvres factory today, and that was purely to work creation. Fantastic. And there's a story about silk making, and they produced enough silk which they were still using in the 1930s in the refurbishment of the French palaces.
Wow, so they basically used the whole population of the city to...
Well, it was to keep them quiet so they wouldn't revolt, because they just killed all the aristocrats.
Of course. Who
had been giving them work. So when it comes to clockmaking, I mean, any figure would have been, first of all, a mould made, a cast made, then it was cast, then chasers, gilders, finishers. I mean, it just went on and on and on. So they couldn't stop making items. So Napoleon wanted to produce a new style to reflect power from the people to the people, as opposed to when the French kings, which was a God-given right to rule.
So, so tell us about this clock. I mean, this is a very showy clock.
This is a very showy clock. There are 8 examples of this clock that were made, and I'm pretty sure that it was made in the Directoire period, and this was finished in about 1805. The name on the dial is the Jolly Brothers, and they are documented. But the major manufacturers of the components are lost. I don't know about that. But of the 8, the Buckingham Palace has got one. The second one is in Stockholm, in the Royal Palace there. There's one in the German castle on the Rhine. Yeah. And there's one, obscurely, I don't know how it's got there, but in Michael Bolivar's house in...
Michael Bolivar is?
You know, the guy who freed South America from the Spanish rule.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
That guy, yeah. And there's one in his house in...
and one in your house as well.
And one in my house, yeah.
Well, what is this worth? It's obviously exceptionally rare. I mean, if you wanted to buy, if you could buy this in today's market,
well, sort of north of 100k anyway.
Wow.
I mean, I don't really know because they never come on the market.
Of course.
Yeah.
And how did you find this? You can't tell.
Yeah, no. I bought it from a dealer in Paris, where I go on a regular basis. I buy nearly all my Empire clocks in Paris. Okay. I mean, that's where most of them are.
And made in France, so.
And made in France, and they don't go far from home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're attracted to clocks. You have been attracted to clocks, obviously, through your family history and stuff like that. I mean, what sort of training do you have? Were you trained up by your family, or is it just
I went to a different clockmaker deliberately, and it's a 5-year craft apprenticeship.
Okay.
Then it was under the auspices of the British Horological Institute.
Okay.
I'm afraid it's all fizzled out now. Fizzled out in the late 70s.
So if you wanted to train now, you just have to get an apprentice with someone like yourself.
No, I don't think there are any clock apprentices at all. There's watch apprentices for which are, there's in Rolexes do a scheme in Birmingham, and you can also go to somewhere called Wopstead, which is in Switzerland. But there's nowhere for clocks really. There's a 2-year course down in Hampshire, but you have to be a clockmaker already, and it's like a finishing course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what that's called? For the
yes,
viewers?
I do.
Are you allowed to tell the viewers? Just
I
in
will.
Case they want to
I will.
When it comes up.
When it comes up.
So what sort of why this period and style that you've been attracted to? Is it just your favourite?
Yes, it is. It is my favourite.
Because you lived in France and you got into the French culture.
I did. That's exactly what happened. Because when the late all the Louis stuff was being produced, it got more and more flamboyant, and I think a lot of people might say that it got completely over the top. The stylistically of Empire stuff is much more militaristic, cleaner lines, straight edges, without all the Rococo flamboyance. I mean, it can be very fussy.
Well, you got some slides. Should we go into?
I have indeed.
Some of the slides
they're basically and there is the front of it.
Wow.
The story.
100 people.
Yeah, probably more. The actual most of the French Empire clocks followed a theme. There was a story behind it. This particular one was the theme of the Oath of the Herati. Now, back in ancient times, when the myth might be true, but
Greek, Roman.
Yeah, Roman, before Rome, and there were 2 cities, the Albanis and the Heratis, and they'd both been at siege for about 20 years, and both cities, states, were decimated with young men. They were all dying all over the place. They were both very poor, and they needed a finish to this conflict. So they got together, and the agreement they had that each side would onto the plain in front of their the city, they would send 3 champions. And this guy, old man Herati, said to his 3 sons, "Please take these swords, go out and do battle, because through this, whoever is victorious, it is honour over life." Napoleon chose this story quite well, which I'll come on to tell you about. But this story was first sort of resurrected, thought, popularised by David, you know, the famous painter because he was in the what would you call it? The intellectual side of the French Revolution. He was right there. He did a lot with Robespierre and all the rest of it. And in the Louvre, I don't know if you've ever been, but there's a massive painting there, about 18 foot wide by 9 foot tall, and it is called the Oath of the Herati. And this was the thing. And it was to promote the average guy, the soldier, the man on the street, that he had a stake in society. He was not a serf anymore. We'd thrown that yoke off. We'd moved from that, and now we were, through honour, we would get glory.
So each person could change the history.
Absolutely. We no longer followed a king. Okay. And that's for this painting. The clockmakers got in on the act. In the painting, in the Louvre, it's huge, and in one corner there's a group of women who are all crying and weeping. And we're told through the story that the older woman is the mother, and she is comforting her daughter. And the daughter is really crying copiously, more upset than you can imagine. And we later learned that because they had been they're so long outside the wall, the girl had fallen in love with one of the champions of the other side.
Oh dear.
So she knew at the end of the day she was going to either lose a brother or a husband or both. And this was to show the how we've got to look after our women in society. Okay. Anyway, and these three guys did it. This one, the clock goes on, and it's got the lower panel. I think we've even got a picture of the panel. There it is here. This is obviously the guy, the only one standing left. He's one of the three brothers. His other two are dead, and the other three champions have already perished.
And it's great for Napoleon because
it is
solidifying the community to fight for him, to give them empower them.
Exactly, because he was trying to get power through when he was in the consulate period. There's lots of further details all about it. On the top there, obviously the three swords, but we've got the three wreaths of victory on this one, and all the other symbolism as well. You can see and there's old man Herati. Why this clock is particularly valued and cherished by me as well is actually the quality of the chasing and all the artistry that the guy employed when he actually made it.
I mean, it's really fine gilding. I mean, would you? You've obviously had this re-gilded over time.
No, I haven't.
Oh
no,
wow,
no,
fine.
No. Yeah, I mean, I think because the previous owners they probably kept a blanket on it, you know, virtually all its life, apart from when they were doing it. Because even the upper edges, all the gilding is still intact. You probably recognise that this is mercurial gilding, as opposed to modern electroplating.
And this is First Empire. I think the Second
Very
Empire
much.
and Third. What dates? What?
This is all. First Empire is during the time actually Napoleon was in power. Okay. So that fizzled out in about 1815. I mean, though people were still producing stuff of that style, but it did change. You can actually see it.
And the Second Empire was a little bit lower. Was it 18?
It was. It was when the restoration of Napoleon II.
Okay.
Then it came back in with a flourish, and then again later on when Napoleon III was on the throne, 1880s, I think.
But the quality sort of diminishes.
It did. Yeah. They were really mass-producing stuff.
More population, more people
higher
wanted
population.
it, therefore they had to make it.
And they cheapened to get the numbers up, yeah. Some of the early Napoleonic clocks, because when he brought in the Napoleonic Code, he brought it in a legal system, which they still use in France today, and he brought in the metric system, that's where the meter comes from and all that.
Oh, wow.
And he even changed the time. And you see a lot of early Napoleonic clocks that have got 10 hours in the day. They're quite rare. Some of them have been reconverted later, back to 12 hours, but they are to be found.
Okay.
And it's
and that changed the whole world. Napoleon changed the whole world on the clock from 10 to 12 hours.
No, it was 12 in England and the rest of the world, but he changed it to decimal time.
Typical French, eh?
Typical French. Didn't last very long, but.
Only joking. Anyone who's French listening, sorry about that.
They've got lovely cheese as well.
Yeah, well,
yeah. But all that fizzled out, and some of them were converted. But you do find the odd one. They've got several examples in the Museum Décoratif Artif in Paris, if you ever want to see any.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, what sort of? Because you've been in the clock industry for a long time now.
Yes.
Are you part of a trade organisation?
Yeah, I mean, I belong to the Worshipful Company of Clockmakers. The Worshipful Company is a livery company in the City of London, right. And they promote the hidden mysteries and secrets of clockmaking to a limited degree. Yeah.
I sold a Howden clock once.
Did you?
A mystery clock. That was.
Yeah. I mean, they never worked very well.
No.
At the best of times.
Yeah. It took about 6 months to get it fixed.
They were a mystery.
Yeah, they definitely were.
Yeah.
But so moving on, we've got
there's the three brothers.
The actual you don't realise when you're looking at this, you're just thinking it's a beautiful clock.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The Roman numeral dial and everything else.
Yeah.
But now you're explaining everything has symbolism here. You've got the shields on the side the side of it.
The victories and there's the all-seeing eye, and then we've got the symbolic, the swords. Wreaths of victory.
The all-seeing eye. Could you explain?
The all-seeing eye. It basically comes from ancient Babylonian times, when that's the evil eye. Couldn't see what you're doing.
Okay, so everyone thinks they're being watched, like Big Brother, an early form of Big Brother.
God.
Yeah. God, of course, yes.
Yeah.
And then these.
Well, those are obviously the flags and emblems of the French army.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, there's the eagle's claw foot, and there's the back view of it again. It would have been sat against the mirror originally. Yeah.
Absolutely stunning.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. It's an epitome of that from that period.
I mean, the gilding seems very fun. How would they do that? How would they put the gilding on? Because it's obviously lasted 200 years plus.
Yes.
And it's still shining like it's gold.
It is gold.
Right.
Underneath, it's made of brass, either cast or rolled, and then gold was dissolved into a mercury amalgam, heated, and almost like a paint, was painted on, and then was placed into a furnace, and then the mercury was burnt off. And that's why we call that term today mercury gilding.
Okay.
Very, very poisonous, dangerous, and many people died.
Of course. Because
of the fumes of the mercury, it actually caused the people who did it to go mad. It just caused a madness.
Yeah,
They were all lunatics. Yeah. Yeah, not fun at all.
And then they just polished it up.
And then you repolished it off, but only lightly. You just burnish it on the highlights.
Okay.
Because often where you get the matte and the burnished, that's where you get the difference.
So if somebody's looking for clocks, what would you if they're looking to buy clocks and collect clocks, obviously this will be out of the range of a lot of people.
Yes.
So would the later, let's say the Second Empire, what would you recommend for them to buy if they love this style of clock? What would you recommend?
Well, I mean, yes, and I am asked this question quite often, as you might imagine, and I do advise people on what to look for. But the golden rule is always to buy the very, very best that you can personally afford, okay, without hurting your pocket, and try to buy it without any damage, because any damage diminishes any increase of value, okay, colossally. But when I'm asked this by different collectors, I normally go to their house and see what other furniture they've got, because it lives with you.
Of course.
You don't live in a museum. It has to match with what your lifestyle. I mean, if you had lots of small children, something like this would be a nightmare, because they
snap it off.
The football would snap off and all the rest of that. And it wouldn't be kind to the clock either.
I mean, are these mass produced? I mean, are there a lot of fakes? How can you tell a fake from a real thing? Obviously, the quality will sing out. I mean, this is an amazing example of a...
Yes, the quality does sing out, and it's very easy to recognise it. There are fakes being made, mostly in China. And you see a lot of French carriage clocks, those small ones.
Yes.
They're being produced. But it's pretty obvious. I mean, particularly
What sort of signs would you look for? You know, for a punter, how would they, just a few pointers for them to look at? I mean, It's obviously common sense.
No.
They need to
one of the things that they nearly always slip up on are the screws. Okay. It's actually put together with screws. And all of those screws were all handmade and polished. You can just see that one, it's even blued.
Yeah.
But all the fakes I've ever seen use mass-produced cheesehead screws, okay, straight out of a machine, and they're all identical. These will all have been handmade.
So they'll all be slightly different.
All slightly different, yeah. That's one of the easy signs to tell.